Well, I encourage you today to read just a shorter version of the story that appears in John chapter 4, verses 31 to 38. This is part of the wonderful story of Jesus' encounter and conversation with the Samaritan woman at a well. But if you're ambitious, I encourage you to read John chapter 4, verses 1 to 42, so you get the whole breadth of the story. But if you're pressed for time, you can read just verses 31 to 38. You may know the story, but just in case you don't, Jesus encounters a Samaritan woman at a well. Samaritans and Jews, they don't talk to each other. They're antagonistic, and she's surprised that Jesus, as both a Jew and a man, is speaking to her. They have this deeper conversation where Jesus reveals his knowledge of her life. She asked him questions about worship and where to worship, and Jesus replies, and she goes through this very quick growth in perception of from seeing him as a man to seeing him as a prophet to wondering if he is in fact the Messiah. And so she goes back into town and becomes a one-person evangelistic movement in inviting everybody in their town to come out and to meet Jesus. And while they do that, she does that, the disciples come back, and that's the section in verses 31 to 38. And John, in a very self-deprecating way, often will make the disciples look a little bit like the Three Stooges, for those of you who are of a certain age, that they just don't get things, they don't understand things or see things. And in verse 34, the disciples are thinking Jesus is talking about food at a physical level. And Jesus is talking at a deeper level about what nurtures and fuels and motivates him. And he says in verse 34, Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to complete his work." Under, again, the theme of using what you've been given, I think that statement is one that's worth reflecting on. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to complete or to accomplish his work. I believe that God has tasks that all of us are called to try to fulfill. This doesn't mean that it's all preset, that you have no involvement or participation or choice or will involved. But I do believe that as we seek to obey and follow God's will, there are things that God has uniquely designed and gifted each one of us to do and to accomplish while we're on this earth. And I encourage you to take time just to think and to reflect. If you're someone who journals, to even write down a little bit, whether it's questions about, God, what might you want me to be doing at this moment and this season and time in my life? Because what that is changes with the different eras we go through in our life, the different periods of responsibility that we have, whether we're a mom with young kids at home, whether we're working, whether we're retired, whether we're single, whether we're married, whether we're now have lost a spouse and are in a different era in our life. How do you determine God's will for your life so that you can seek to accomplish it? Well, as we've been talking this week, part of that involves prayer, seeking and asking God for guidance and direction. And then it's doing all that we can to accomplish God's will in our life in this season of our life.